Hi, everybody. You've made it. It's the last full-time presentation of the day, and then just a cap off. So thank you for being here. Thank you for sitting it out and lasting the entirety of the day. So I am going to be talking about getting traffic from zero-click searches with language and SEO. And this is something that I'm very excited to be talking to you about today, and I just realized I'm going to slow down, or at least I'm going to try, so that the translator doesn't hate me. I've been told by translators that I owe them beer when I get off stage. He just waved at me. Okay. So I will try. So getting traffic from zero-click searches using language and SEO. Now, the thread, the common theme throughout this talk is going to be coffee, because number one, I love coffee. It's the only thing that makes me fully human. But number two, I think that coffee is a good analogy for an international language. There's coffee pretty much everywhere you go. Some people prefer tea, but really everywhere you go, you can get a coffee. It might be a little bit different. But in general, it's going to be brown and wake you up, and that's good enough. So we're going to talk about language in terms of coffee. So we know, first off, that Google cares a lot about language. They've made a lot of announcements and changes and utilities that help SEOs and webmasters do a better job communicating things about language on their site, but also help, from Google's perspective, processing language and making it easier for them not just to translate words, but to get a truer understanding of what the site is about. And we heard some of this from Dixon earlier, but of course, BERT, Albert, the Natural Language API, hreflang, Elmo, these are all things in the Google verse that kind of help them really understand in a deeper way what's going on a website. And I think that a lot of this has been driven by the advancement of mobile technology and digital assistants, because not only is understanding language important when you're doing perhaps a voice search or a conversational query, but it's also just important to understand a query well. When you have a smaller screen, you have less options for the user to feel like you got it right. On a big screen, the user can click on something that they think is a fit to their query, but on a smaller screen, there's just less opportunity for the user to find the right answer, and so they've got to get it right, just right at the top of the page. So it's more pressure to understand the query and get the top result as right as possible. And so this plays into mobile very deeply, I think, the language understanding and SEO. And so Google's ability to understand language is what gets us this new kind of search where, well, not really new, but this better search where Google understands that a red stoplight is something that you might see when you're driving, but that stoplight red is something more likely to be in the cosmetics aisle with nail polish or lipstick. And so these two things, even though they're the same keywords in a different order, are fundamentally different things, or likely represent different types of queries. But Google still does need help with this, often because many words have multiple meanings. Of course, these are all pictures of jaguars, except for the coffee cup, that one's not. But these are all jaguars, and so Google might need us to help disambiguate, at least a little bit. And I think that they're getting better at this, and that they could even get better at this over time, because with the personalization that Jono referenced, that he thinks we can expect, and I agree, I think that if I've been searching for lots of animals that Google could make decisions about what I'm likely to want here, or if I've been searching historically for lots of cars, they might make a weighting decision about how likely is it that I'm actually searching for a car or an animal. And perhaps my search history could contribute to changes here in the future, not now. But there are a lot of signals that Google could be using to help them even get a deeper, better understanding of language. And of course, languages can have many variations, not just one word that means the same thing in one language, but one language meaning different things in different places. So for instance, the difference between chips in the United States, which come in a plastic bag, and chips in Britain, which are in newspaper with fish. So one word can have multiple meanings in different countries. So they could use geolocation to understand the meaning between chips and chips, but actually I've seen people recently in the UK complaining that the chips, how many calories are in chips, result is wrong, that it's coming back with potato chips, and they're very angry about this. So as webmasters, we can do a lot to help Google understand what kinds of content we have in which languages, especially hreflang. They got extra vocal about the importance of hreflang right before the launch of mobile-first indexing, and again, recently they've re-upped on the importance of having hreflang on both the mobile and the desktop version of your site so that it gets crawled and understood correctly without a lot of effort. So that's important. And if you don't have separate pages, you might be trusting JavaScript to do this, and good luck. Hopefully that works. Google says it will, or it should. But there are a lot of things that we as webmasters do to switch in the right language for our users. But however you handle it, you have to realize how much Google must rely and care about language, because as a search engine, all they have is language. When we search, we're using language. Our queries are in a language, and algorithms are too. Algorithms are language specific because they have to be, because in one language, one keyword or one concept might be described with 2 words, but that same concept might need 3 words in a different language. So they have to, at least to some degree, have different algorithms for different languages. So that makes sense. But we've kind of belabored this point. Language is important to Google. It's so important. But when we look at Search Console, what they report to us is about queries, pages, countries, devices, search appearance, and dates. But they don't tell us anything about language. They leave it to us to understand what language the queries are in. But they do a lot of work in the search result to detect language, but they're just not sharing that information of what they've guessed or what they've detected. And this makes SEO especially complicated, and especially in countries where multiple languages are spoken and multiple official languages are spoken. And this is the Wikipedia page that shows you which languages are spoken where and what the official languages of every country are. And of course, you know that in Europe, there are many countries that have multiple official languages. Now, I know what you're thinking. Isn't it cute that the Americans here are just learning about the rest of the world and they speak different languages? And fair enough, I get that, I feel that. But I can tell you that I have lived outside of the United States, and both of my parents are multilingual. So I care a lot about language too. And in fact, my company did a very long 5-post article series about the relationship between mobile-first indexing and entities, because I think mobile-first indexing and entities are deeply related, that part of the goal of Google launching mobile-first indexing was to begin indexing concepts together, even if they were in different languages. And that's what this article goes into, or this series goes into, is the concept of entity indexing and why it might be important for Google in the future. So I care very much about the relationship between entities and language and SEO. But as a business, you also should care. And that's especially true if you're trying to target tourists or immigrants, if your website facilitates any kind of international business, if your website serves international clientele, or just if you want links. Because if your website is only written in one language that targets only one country or one portion of a country, then the likelihood of you getting big links from big international websites is much lower. And so internationalizing your content is not only good for your business, but it's good for the users, and it's good for SEO as a whole, because it opens you up to the potential for a lot more interaction with the rest of the web. So let's take a quick survey. And I know you're tired and it's been a long day, but we're going to do a survey. You have to participate. Now, who has their phone language in here set in English? Raise your hand. English? OK, French? Something else? OK, fair. All right. Now, who changed the language setting on your phone this week? Last week? Last month? Last year? Does anyone in here know how to change their phone language quickly within 2 seconds? You can't do it within 2 seconds. That's a trick question. OK, my point is, people forget about language settings on their devices, especially phones, but also browsers. And these things can affect search results. So let's break this down in a very simplified way, because there are many things that people think impact Google's ability to understand language. The first would be the country version of Google. People think this comes into play, and I think it probably still does, but Google made an announcement that they're trying to limit the impact that the different country versions of Google have on queries. The query language impacts what's going to rank, and then, of course, the default language setting of the phone or the browser impacts the search results that you're going to get. And so you can tell what language your phone is set in by which language the navigation is in. It's always translated to meet the default language of the device. So these three things are separate, and you can do things with them to get different results. And in fact, you'll see in a minute, the results can be quite different. But all of these things kind of work together when Google is trying to match a query with something in the topic layer. And the more confident they are that they understand what your query is, the more likely it seems that you'll get position zero, entity-oriented types of results. And the more confusing it is, the more likely it is that you might get other types of results. Sometimes it's a lot more images. Sometimes it's a translation of did you mean? Or, you know, we think you're speaking Spanish, but we think you want it translated to German. They're just not sure. So they try a lot of things to try and narrow down what is it that you really want. So the query understanding comes from these factors and can change the results quite dramatically. Now, I got this data from SEMrush just last Friday because I wanted to find out how likely is it for Google to return a knowledge graph or a featured snippet in the different languages, and how much does that change between desktop and mobile? What you can see is that, for instance, and I asked on this English mobile 1%, that seems wrong, and I pushed back on them, but they said that that's definitely what their data says, so ask SEMrush about that. But some of these numbers are quite different. You can see in Germany, the likelihood of getting a featured snippet on mobile is quite low, but the likelihood of getting a knowledge graph on mobile is significantly higher. And so the point of this data is to tell you that whether some SEOs, there are two beliefs. Some SEOs want position zero. They think it's great. They're in kind of Jono's court where they're like, lift my stuff. I love it. And then some SEOs hate it. They're like, no, if there's a knowledge graph or if there's featured snippet, it's going to take all my traffic, and that's going to suck. I don't care which side you're on. What I care is that you're looking into it and you're knowing the likelihood of that impacting your ability to do a good job, whatever that is, as an SEO. If doing a good job is driving featured snippets, great, you should know. If doing a good job is preventing featured snippets, you should also know. So I want you guys to realize that these things, the propensity changes from device to device and also from language to language. Nod if you're with me. You understand? OK, thanks. OK, so that gets us back to this understanding of language thing. So this is a picture of the natural language API parsing a sentence. And what you can see here is that it goes back to like middle school, where you had to diagram different parts of a sentence. And it says this word is related to this word, and this word describes this word. And so it's going very deep into understanding and really trying hard to understand what this sentence actually means. And what you should know as an SEO is that you can put your text from your website into this tool to see how well Google's understanding it. And you can also use it to see how is Google picking out the entities from your text. So you can see this is the standard issue text from the they've taken Cloud, from the natural language API tool, and you just delete it out and put your own text in there. But what you can see is that they've pulled in and they've said Google is an organization, Android is a consumer good, Mountain View is a location, Sundar Pichai is a person, right? Now, if you were to put your text from your website in here and they were to miscategorize it, that might tell you that there's a problem with how Google's understanding your text. And what we've done is we've actually found that very small changes, like minutia changes that you wouldn't think of as part of SEO, can change how this is parsed. That includes things like capitalization and punctuation. I've gotten something understood as a consumer good by capitalizing it when it wasn't before. I've got someone understood correctly as a person by adding a period or a dash. And I can tell you that We haven't done massive scale testing for all of SERPs, but I can tell you that a small case study we did with an app and the app packs, ranking the app packs, there was an app that came to us that said, hey, we are clearly this, but we're not showing up for this. Why? And what we did is we put the text of the app descriptions through the Cloud Natural Language API, and we found that they wanted to rank for podcasts. We found that all of the apps that were ranking for a query on podcast podcast was considered a consumer good, but our podcasts were being considered a work of art, podcast work of art. And so what we did was we changed the text to make sure that Google understood that we were a consumer good, and we went from not in the top 100 apps in the app pack to immediately 37, then 27. So what this tells you is that at least in app packs, and probably in the rest of the web, the entity understanding from the text that you're promoting is impacting how Google classifies the content on your website. So let's go back to language. This is a query for Amazon, and you can see that I've written Amazon in English. This is where I want to show you the importance of the default phone language setting. Notice that there's a little bit of Hindi on the screen. That's because the default language setting on this phone is Hindi. So I've typed in English, but the setting is Hindi. So what you'll see is that everything from Google is in Hindi, and it's asking me every time, do I want to translate this? At the end, that's what that little bit, it's the same characters at the end every time. But when we scroll down and get to the knowledge graph, what language is it written in? Hindi. But I searched in English. So Google is working really hard to match what I've expressed very specifically as my need or my preference for Hindi. And it's saying, you know, we've got knowledge graph in English and Hindi, but you said Hindi, so we're going to give you Hindi. Now, the other results are still mostly English because I searched in English. But Google's trying harder in the knowledge graph, in the topic layer, to meet my personal needs. Not if you're with me. I know it's late. You can make it. Okay. So knowledge graph actually matches the phone language, even if it conflicts with the query language, if they have knowledge graph that they can show you in your phone language. And know that also you can have multiple languages set on your phone, but the default language is the only language that counts in terms of search rankings, or at least in terms of what you get on your phone. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that I know that you guys have rank tracking software, or I imagine that you do, but that you probably also spot test on your phone or on someone else's phone in your office when you're like, what's happening? How does the mobile result look? You periodically want to see. And what I want you to know is that changing the language of the query alone is not enough. That you have to actually pass real signals, and that you might not be getting an accurate idea of what's happening, especially, let's say, if you're in a country where multiple languages are spoken, your phone can only be in one language, and so you're not getting information when you do your spot check about the other languages. So changing the language isn't enough, and changing the country version of Google is not enough for a valid test to really understand what the search results look like. Now, this matters. And what I'm going to prove to you, I hope, is that you need to see real results that pass all of the information that a real searcher might. And now, the pushback I know from what I'm about to show you is that it's complex. It makes it complex. But know that Google is going towards a deeper personalization, and you're going to have to get comfortable with a little bit of complexity. And Matt puts this really well. I think this is really well expressed of how I feel, is that my issue with data, and especially Search Console, I'm just going to eject that, is that it makes us optimize for what's easiest to measure while ignoring what's difficult to measure. That the complexity of what's happening in the search results is very often aggregated in a way that covers up some nuance that might give you huge opportunities for SEO. So let's look at a case study. We're going to localize it. We're going to make it a local-oriented query so that we really can get something interesting and real. And since Martin's here, I pretended in this query to do all of these queries from standing in the Google Zurich offices, so you can compare when you get home. So in Switzerland, there are 4 official languages: French, Italian, German, and Romansh. We're skipping Romansh. We're going to focus on French, German, and Italian. And we're going to pretend we're 3 people sitting right next to each other with the exact same phone, sitting in the Google Zurich offices. And the only difference between the phone is going to be the language setting for the default. So if you're a normal SEO, you might have your SEMrush campaign set up like this. What you can see here is we have Zurich German, and we have the German keywords over there. And then we're tracking Zurich Italian, and we have the Italian keywords over here, and we're looking at that. And then you have Zurich French, and the French keywords are in there. That all makes sense. That's what the tool wants us to do. But here's what happens, is you can only have one phone language at a time. So I'm doing a search for espresso. And what's interesting about espresso is it's spelled the same in all three of those languages. So the first language we started with was Italian, and we have two phones side by side. What we're going to do on that right phone is scroll down to the bottom and click the German link, and we're going to change it. And then we're going to have side-by-side comparison of what these two search results look like when we change it. So you can see there's stuff going on. This is a real result, normal stuff. All right, we're at the bottom. Let's switch. From Italian to German. There you go. All right, so different paid, of course, that's fine. But notice the first thing in German is knowledge graph with some disambiguation at the top. That's different than the first thing on the left, which is m.espresso, republic.it, and then a map result. So they both have the map result, but in German, it's knowledge graph first. When we switch it to French, similar result, knowledge graph first, but then a video carousel. Do you see that coming in there? Video carousel, then more information, some disambiguation, and then the map. So if you care about local SEO, you need to know where that map is, and it keeps getting pushed down when we switch languages. But if you're in just regular Blue Link organic, you keep getting pushed down even more below that map. That matters. As position 1 gets further and further down the page, the likelihood of you getting a click is going to change dramatically because there's all this colorful, flashy, interactive stuff at the top. Do you get it? All right, good. Sorry, translator. Oh my God, I sped up. I'm slowing down. We're going to take a breath. All right, so perhaps you knew this, and you're not learning anything, and you're bored, and you're irritated. That's fine. Okay, fine. Let's do a new test. This time, we'll do something that fits with the way your SEMrush is set up. We're going to search for German with a German language setting and German spelling of coffee. Coffee has different spellings, unlike espresso. So we'll search German and German, French and French, and Italian and Italian. Fine. This is what you get when you do it properly, perhaps. Things change, right? These are not the same. You're getting not only different websites, but also different locations of big blockers like a Wikipedia or a map result, a related carousel, interesting finds. These interesting finds, people also ask, those are not reported to you in Search Console, but they're taking traffic. They're taking a ranking position. They're taking that traffic, maybe more, but they're not reported to you in Search Console. Related searches at the bottom. This is what it looks like when it's all colored up. They are quite different results. And the only site that shows up in more than one language is Zurich.com. If you are only tracking Italian keywords or Italian keyword setting in SEMrush and you're Cafe CH, you're telling your boss you're killing it. But you are not for 2/3 of the population because you're not even showing up in the other two language default settings. Coffee Circle gets a .com and a .ch, Cafe Central.ch, that's got some. So there are some winners in each language, but it's not a consistent winner. And that is something that you might want to know as an SEO. So, okay, but maybe you don't care. You're like, duh, of course it's a different keyword. It's going to be a different result. Fine. Fine. Now, just so you know, this is what that looks like when you gray out the piece that Google's taking, the Google tax. That's all Googly stuff that you cannot have. And then when you look at the big winners who are really owning the space, and then you look at what's left, you're fighting for scraps. There are 3 or 4 positions maximum that you have on this search result per language. There's not much available. And so if you're having a hard time expressing how hard SEO is to your boss, do something like this. New test, last test. Now, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to sit in the Zurich offices with 3 phones with 3 different language settings. But we're going to mix it up, because if you're multilingual, do you change the language setting on your phone every time? No, you do not. So you're sending a mixed signal every time you're searching in a language that is not the default language setting on your phone. So if we search with coffee, spelled the German way, with German settings, French settings, and Italian settings, this is what that looks like. There's a map result at the top. There's Wikipedia on 2. Interesting finds, and people also ask, big on German. German has a lot of deep understanding because it has a lot of Google inclusions in there. Search by image, 2 of them, related searches. That's what it looks like when Google takes their piece. So what does this tell you? Immediately, I should be working more on French and Italian because there's just more opportunity to be high up. Position 1 means more if I rank with the French language setting or the Italian language setting, okay? So this speaks to the importance of translation. If you haven't translated your content in all the languages, you probably should at least do these tests to see if you should, to see if the opportunity is better in the different languages, and to help you make the case if you get pushback internally. Let's look at it with French. This is what the French looks like. Similar, we've got Wikipedia on 2 of them, search by image on all of them. People only ask this time only in French. That's what it looks like when Google takes their piece. This one isn't as much, it's kind of even. Maybe French is the hardest, but the mixed signals are a little bit easier for you to rank. Zurich.com, again, they're looking good in 2 languages here, but not all 3. Oh no, this one they have all 3. Good for them. Good for them. That is the only time you'll see one website ranking with all 3 default language settings for the 3 major languages in Switzerland. This is what Italian. You can see again, maps at the top. That's what Google takes their piece. This one, German's hard again. German-Italian mix is hard. And then Italian is hard if you're anyone but cafe.ch. Oh, and I should mention, let's go back to French. One thing that makes cafe interesting, because I'm super nerdy about language, is that cafe is a word in all 3 languages. It just means a location instead of just a coffee. You can go to a cafe, even if you're not, when you're searching for coffee, it's the same word. Anyway, moving on. I've lost you. Okay, so that's what it looks like when Google takes their cut there. So what I want you to start doing when you're working with multinational, multilingual audiences is to start think like this, doing multiple things without changing that default setting. So you need to think like this instead of like this. Because the reality is that people don't search like this. They're not changing their language setting when they're changing their query language. And so when you're setting up any kind of tracking campaign, whether it's in SEMrush or whatever, you need to put all of the translated words in all the default language settings. So this is Zurich French, but Zurich French needs to include French, Italian, and German keywords so that you can know which SERP features are there and where is the easy opportunity and where is it going to be too hard to compete. And you need to set up one campaign like this for French, Italian, and German and put all the keywords in all 3 campaigns to see where is the real opportunity and to really get an understanding of what you're doing and what you're actually trying to get when you're doing SEO. And you also need to stop searching only on your phone with your default setting because it's not helping you and it might be masking opportunity and it might also be masking success. So think like this. We have a tool that will let you be anywhere in the world. So you can see that's the Zurich office, and you can see I've got my keywords over there, and I've got them labeled for which setting they're in. And you can see and scroll. I've blocked out the real data. There's Search Console data there. But you can see and scroll through and get a real result that's passing all of the same information that a real phone would. And you can click around and get that in a radius if you're doing local SEO, so you can see 10 miles out, 20 miles out. What do real, actual results look like? Because I can tell you that even when you're in something like SEMrush that gives you a little symbol for what kind of featured inclusions or what kind of featured snippets or what kind of Google stuff is there, it's not going to be as impactful to your clients or your bosses as a real-life picture would. Or graying it out and saying, this is stuff we can't change, or we likely cannot change. So you need to be testing reality, and I'm not saying do this on scale. This isn't meant for massive keyword tracking. It's meant for spot checking to know what a real search result looks like without having to fly around the world to get the real, or ask on Twitter. Don't you find that embarrassing, you guys? Stop doing that. Hey, could someone in Philadelphia do a search for me for this keyword and send me a screenshot? You don't have to do that. We let you archive the tests if you want to, and you can even export them to Google Sheets. See the button that says Export to Google Sheets? What that does is it gives you something like this, which includes the language and the location and the phones, and you can click Run Test, and so you're an actual human running this test. So you get a live result right then when you click that phone icon. That's all built in. So the takeaway here, zero-click searches are up, and they're taking traffic away from you, but that varies language by language, location by location, and you really need to see real results to get the idea of what's really going on, because a lot of this stuff that's taking your traffic is not actually in most of your analytics. Rank Ranger, they gave me data on Friday too. They did it by country, and what they said is somewhat similar, different, just for featured snippets, because of course that's very controversial right now. But you can see things are different by country, they're different by language, and you should at least have an idea of the propensity for things like featured snippets to show up, and know that because it's showing up in mobile doesn't mean it's in desktop or vice versa. You should be doing real tests. And know that also sometimes featured snippets change even within one language. So this was set to English, and you can see the best coffee mug was a Yeti, and it was from Food and Wine magazine. And it's going to scroll to the bottom and do a language change. We're going to change language from English to German. Same query, best coffee mug, still written in English, but the winner is different. This time it's La Cruste, and it's a different site. It's from thespruce.com. So the best coffee mug apparently changes based on your language setting in featured snippets. So don't just assume that if you have a featured snippet in one language or in one place that you have it everywhere. These things change as well. So what can you do? Number one, don't rely exclusively on any of the numbers in your analytics. They mask the impact of position 0 and any of the Google inclusions, like people also ask, that are taking traffic away from you in the SERP. Always use SEO tools that let you specify a language. If they're not even letting you specify the query language, then they might just not be sending enough signals to get a real valid result anyway. They look fake. And be aware of the differences and opportunities caused by language settings, and translate content when you see an opportunity, and make sure to optimize content. Don't just devalue content because you've done a search on your phone and saw that there's no opportunity. If you haven't translated or you haven't changed the default language setting, there might be opportunity that you're just missing when you spot test on your own phone. Do real spot tests with real location settings and language settings. Don't trust your own phone. And life's short, enjoy your coffee. And there's a promo code if you want to try those tools out. 30 days free, all caps Paris.